Welcome to Imagine Otherwise, the podcast about the people and projects bridging art, activism, and academia to build better worlds. Episodes offer in-depth interviews with creators who use culture for social justice and explore the nitty-gritty work of imagining otherwise. I'm your host, Cathy Hanneback. This is a special episode of the Imagine Otherwise podcast and is the second in a three-part miniseries exploring the APAC Culture Lab coming up July 7th through 9th in Honolulu, Hawaii. APAC is sponsored by the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center, otherwise known as APAC. Most of APAC's participants are based in or rooted in Hawaii, with the majority of artists identifying as Pacific Islanders. Across the 3 episodes of this miniseries, I talk with curators, artists, and scholars involved with APAC about the themes that this culture lab brings together, ranging from climate change and environmental activism in Hawaii, solidarities and activism across the Pacific archipelago, queer and trans Indigenous art, Hawaiian sovereignty and the ongoing fight against U.S. colonialism in the region, and the way that the racial, gender, national, decolonial, and environmental convergences of Hawaii help us imagine and produce different worlds. In this episode, I talk with 3 of the artists participating in APAC: Rosanna Raymond, Léuli Māzyār Lunaʻi Eshrāghi, and Ricky Tagaban. Rosanna is an artist of Samoan heritage, working in the mediums of performance, poetry, installation, and costume and fashion design. Born in New Zealand and having lived over a decade in London, Rosanna is also a founding member of Pacific Sisters, a collective of Pacific and Maori artists, performers, fashion designers, jewelers, and musicians that contemporize traditional perceptions of Pacific art. Léuli is a Samoan and Persian artist, curator, writer, and PhD candidate in the Art Design Architecture program at Monash University. His work focuses on indigeneity, language, the body, and queer futures. Across video, photography, painting, and installation, Léuli processes intergenerational trauma, honors diasporic indigeneity, and imagines multilingual, sovereign bodies and relationships to our planet. Ricky is a Two-Spirit Tlingit contemporary artist, Indigenous weaver, and drag performer based in Juneau, Alaska. Ricky's work foregrounds the Chilkat weaving technique, a form of textile design practiced by the First Peoples of the Northwest Coast. In our interview, we talk about the radical convergences of decolonization, gender and sexual sovereignty, and environmentalism across the Pacific, Indigenous queer and transgender art making, and the collaboration that Rosanna, Léuli, and Ricky are planning for the upcoming APAC Culture Lab. Thanks so much, you all, for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So to get us started, I'd love to hear from all of you what the theme of APAC or convergence means to you. How are you all approaching this theme?
The overall theme of APAC, to me, I always look at convergence as a space that's actually very active and quite volatile, actually. Because there's where things meet, there's usually a lot of energy or a lot of friction. So I've sort of looked at the convergence of not necessarily just all the kind of happy be merry stuff of merging, more converging. So and then also as an artist that's sort of coming into another land that holds its own sovereignty. The Hawaiians hold the mana of the land. So, like, as a guest, how that affects what I produce and how I honour the mana of the Hawaiians. I'm from Aotearoa, New Zealand, but I'm born of Samoan heritage. I'm New Zealand born, Pacific Islander. So, the Hawaiians to us, they're part of our moana whānau. They're our family. We have genealogical connections. So I suppose some of the piece I'm looking at is some of these shared colonial traumas and the erasure of our histories, the theft of our bodies, language and culture.
Well, I'm approaching it thinking about time not being linear. I'm thinking of time as more of a spiral, and then how that affects standards of beauty and colonization in the sense of not really decolonization, but how it's ongoing and trying to decolonize standards of beauty, but time has a funny effect on that. Standards of beauty are definitely, like, that was a mode of colonization with dominant cultures imposing their own standards of beauty. And on a super personal level, because I'm mixed heritage, skin tone is the big one. And whiteness is kind of the current standard in my part of the world.
Well, I guess I visualized it from when they explained it, that it's like where saltwater and freshwater meet or something along those lines. So I think of it as gathering together and lots of different ways of being in a conversation. I think any kind of gathering is a convergence, but it's like particular conditions of sharing and one not trying to overtake the other, or in this case, many different perspectives being shared and aired and explored.
So the last time we saw each other was actually the first time that I met all of you. And that was back in April in Honolulu, Hawaii, where we all met up for that first artist convening, that first time that all of the artists and curators and scholars involved with Aikai got to actually be in the same space for the first time. And I found that a really powerful experience, and talking with a lot of the other folks, it seems like they did as well. So I'm curious how that first artist convening has shaped the way that you three are approaching Aikai and your individual pieces, as well as your collaboration within it.
Firstly, I felt it was great, and maybe we needed another few days.
I totally agree.
I think we were really getting into the meaty stuff, and getting to know each other. But there's always budget constraints. That's fine. I wasn't sure if I wanted to, if it would be correct in the right atmosphere to bring this project, Poliuli, which I've mounted in Melbourne recently in April and May. So I opened it, and then it started. It was like a progressive install. So multiple works being installed throughout the month of April, and then a number of activations, lectures, and performances in early May. And so in the middle of that, I came to Hawaii for the convening, and I was like, oh yeah, actually this would work. And I think particularly because one of the artists in the project is from Hawaii, Jessie DeVera. I got really excited about what kind of activation I might be able to do as a performance artist myself.
I think it was special to be in that time and place with such a big group of artists. I thought it was really special to have so many local people and to really be hosted in a way that is very local. I think whenever I'm around and a bunch of Indigenous people, I get the sense that we have more in common than not, and especially with seafaring cultures. My tribe, where the mountains and the ocean meet, and Hawaii is very much the same. And Léuli and Rosanna are the two artists that I connected with the most, and they definitely have that in their background.
Definitely being brought onto the land was really powerful. Being brought into Honolulu, especially as we're at the moment we're all based in America. So and just being able to sit next to face, keep kanohi face to face and meet and eat and just kind of hang with all the other artists gave so much excitement. It was amazing. So I love that. I mean, we work very much in an Indigenous framework. We have wānangas, and we have intensive time with each other to spend and to learn and to play and experiment. So I was really comfortable in that setting. But I feel like just getting to the actual land just really helped me feel the land, smell the land. And when we went to the gardens, we actually met the locals. That was really, really special for me. And then I got to meet Léuli, who I've met and sort of worked with before, so that was really nice, having a friendly face that I kind of knew, so we kind of hid together a lot and laughed a lot. And then meeting Ricky was wonderful. We really found that we sort of naturally came together, so that was really nice, and that was how the sort of collaboration started, was just having that space to sit down with each other, and that would never have happened if we weren't all in the same room at the same time.
So speaking of collaboration, I know the three of you are working on a piece together, and then Léuli, you're also doing a second piece called Poliuli. And I'd love to hear about how you all are approaching that collaboration, your individual pieces, and then how you're imagining them to all come together in the final work.
So Poliuli is a Indigenous art archive and exhibition, and that the works are the same works that I showed in Melbourne, and they're from Dene Cree artists from Vancouver, a Lakota artist from LA, Tahitian artist from Hawaii, Samoan artist from Sydney, a Tōrepi PNG artist from Melbourne, and a trio from Samoan and Tongan trio from Auckland. So it's quite like there's lots of different experiences of colonialism, a lot of different experiences of queerness and indigeneity and gender. So I think I'm still trying to find how to frame their work so that they can speak for themselves, but also like give audiences a bit of a way in. But the archive space is really important in the kind of giving capacity for people to gain Indigenous art histories through all of the texts that are there to be read.
Very cool. So how about the collaborative piece? How are you guys piecing that together?
Yeah, well, within our collaboration, we sort of set, like, it's 3 individual artists and artworks that actually all get woven together through a Samoan term, po'ula, which is the night dance. And this has been great frivolity and anything would go sort of type thing. So I sort of found a piece of this concrete that it looked like a pathway. In fact, it looked like a catwalk. So I was just like, check that out. And that's when I was sitting next to Ricky and I was like, did you see that catwalk in there? And he's like, yeah. So him and I, being a little bit part frock, we started to go, wouldn't that be great if we use that to activate during the process? So when I came back, I was thinking of that particular space, and I work a lot with body adornment and body sovereignty and how that would unfold, and also sexuality. All 3 of us share very gender fluid meeting spaces within our own bodies and sexualities. So that's when I came up with a concept of the whaamu'umu'u mamatane, because I'm an old girl, I'm a mama, and I definitely tend towards the tane side, which is the male side, and a lot of my body language, the way that I move. And I suppose a lot of that is part of reclaiming a lot of what has been constructed within the Pacific body, especially within the Dusky Maiden. You know, not all of us sit around in hula skirts and dance hula. So, you know, some of us do pick up the warrior rako, and we are warriors and we do fight. Looking at the military presence in Hawaii too, it's very, very present, and it's, you know, made Hawaii a target too, an international target. It's added $14.7 billion into the Hawaiian economy, so there's no way that, you know, you could take it out easily. It provides over 102,000 jobs, and that's a lot of jobs in a small island. So its presence is felt both positively through those, you know, financially and through giving jobs to locals, but it also has a very negative side as well. You just have to look at Pearl Harbor. Now, I don't think Hawaii would have been considered a target by international people if it wasn't for the American presence of the military. So, you know, so I'm looking at that. So I'm creating a garment, I'm repurposing military uniforms to create a mu'umu'u, which is a missionary garment that clothed the body of these naked women by the missionaries. So I'm sort of melding a whole lot of things together that I will then, when I say I will activate this, and sort of toying around with some spoken word and to acknowledge a lot of our atua in Hawaii and through Aotearoa and the Moana and the Pacific. We have a lot of shared histories and cultural icons. We have tangaroa, we have rongo, we have hina. So I'm really looking at the atua, especially some of our female deities that have been written out of histories by men. So as you can see, it's really fertile ground.
So I perform as a drag queen, and I end up with a lot of leftover pantyhose. So they're a specific skin color, and I'm cutting those and spinning them, so that's where the spiral comes in. I started Chilkat weaving in 2010, and I was asked to learn the art because of my gender identity. As a two-spirit person, Chilkat is reserved for women and two-spirit people. So being asked to learn something prestigious. Like, this art form is reserved for important people, and it's making garments for important ceremonies. I'm using traditional spinning techniques on something modern like nylon. I'm spinning tons and tons and tons of nylons, and I'm going to wrap them around pillars. And so you'll see different skin tones, kind of depending on which direction you read them, the skin tones will change. So there's a bunch of spiral stuff happening there. But I'm also going to wear pantyhose, a garment completely made out of pantyhose. So I'll be performing in drag as Latuya. That's my drag persona. Not at all a goddess like Rosanna. But I think the main point is for people, queer people and people with different gender identities, gay adjacent people, advocates, really anyone who's ever had to think about gender or sexuality, to have a sense of ceremony.
I also heard a rumor that you're bringing in more artists to help you with this collaboration, folks from the local area. Is that true? How's that going? How are they being part of the collaboration?
In the club space that we were envisaging, there'll be a few people, local artists that we're inviting to activate the space as well. This might be like a historian exploring like particular mo'olelo, particular proverbs and expressions, or it might be activist artists talking about what they're doing. Like, for example, there's Joy Inamoto, who I'm really keen to invite, who is an African-American and Native Hawaiian artist and activist, and she kind of brings a lot of topical issues to the fore in her writing and in her activations in public, particularly around Black Lives Matter and the Hawaiian sovereignty movement. So there's like really interesting intersectionalities there that I think are really emblematic of Hawaii as a place, like this, as like all these sets of communities that are really intermingled and intersectional. And I guess that's the point of convergence for me, that like it's a very particular platform that we have, and it's a privilege to have space. So it's important to share that with local artists in this kind of international platform.
Working collaboratively with other artists or scholars or fellow activists or people on a project is one of those things that can be both amazing and really challenging. So I'd love to get into the kind of nitty-gritty of how you've approached this. I know all three of you have a lot of experience working collaboratively in the past, but how has that helped you approach your collaboration at APAC?
I've always worked within a collective space. Actually, I was part of the Pacific Sisters, which was an arts collective in the 80s, 90s, and actually still going. And also now as the founding member of the Savage Club, which is another collective, and that I work with. I find collectives really and collaborating very rewarding, but you cannot put your ego at the center. It's something that, if you do, it's not really a collaboration of sorts. Or maybe if you do put it at the center, you're not opening yourself up to being able to get all those yummy things that you do get out of collaborating with people by bringing on new ideas that you never would have thought of by yourself. And that's what I really enjoy about that collaborating process, and actually really getting to know other artists, like sitting down, eating with them, drinking with them, playing with them, and just, letting yourself be open to new ways of thinking and new ways of working and sharing of skills. Both Ricky and I both have a lot of craft skills, and we are really looking forward to sitting down with each other and seeing what we definitely saw that we had these craft practices that we have in common. Even though he's from Alaska and I'm from down the other part of the world, there are craft techniques that are both embedded in our cultural history. So that's where we started to get quite excited. And then, I hope I can offer and share new ways of using and vice versa.
One of the most exciting things I found about this year's Culture Lab is the model that APAC is offering. This very different way of presenting art than you get in a traditional group show or individual show in a traditional museum. APAC is paying artists fairly to produce new work. I know, what a concept. Bringing a bunch of artists together from all over the world, giving them the resources and the freedom that they need to work together, and showing kind of how art can be made that is responsible to and responsive to the communities in which it takes place, rather than it just being this thing that comes in from the outside, shows up for a weekend or an exhibit time, and then picks up and leaves town. And so I'm curious what your experience has been working with the Culture Lab model here at ICAI, as well as maybe how it contrasts or is similar perhaps to your experience working in other kinds of art making and art distribution contexts.
I've never worked in a group this large. There's like 53 artists, and a lot of us have more artists that are coming in. So it's kind of like I don't know, how often does these happen? Maybe it's like once a year. So it's like, but it's kind of like the biennial scale in my head. But to have that kind of engagement with place and together is pretty great. I've worked in the community art. I've worked in the contemporary art sector, curator, writer, artist, activist. I feel that it's really good that it has this kind of format, this kind of like openness to how people are connecting, and also a responsiveness to the local community, because I don't live in Hawaii, and there are, I think, more than a third of the artists are based there or from there, which is really good. Yeah, and I think the Honolulu Biennial was a really good example of that kind of thinking as well, which is like quite distinct from the regular practice in the art world, where, you know, people just come and plonk it in and then leave. And like if you get it written up in a magazine back home, then that's fine. But it's like, what does that actually do for the people locally? And I mean, it is art in the end. It's like, I don't know if we're going to like change the world in one weekend of performances, but there's a lot that we can do and spark conversations and maybe inspire other people to do things, or be inspired ourselves to change our work or entirely. Yeah, I think that the whole point of openness for all of us is really important and really timely.
So one of the big convergences that a lot of the artists in ICAI are exploring, and the three of you are doing in different ways in your work, is this relationship between humanity and the planet. And you're approaching it in different ways and through different mediums and themes, but it does seem to be a kind of common thread across a lot of the works that are going to be showing at ICAI. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you're approaching that relationship between humans and the natural environment. Some of you are approaching it through climate change issues. Some of you are approaching it through environmental justice, decolonization. So I'm curious how this theme has showed up for you in your work.
Global issues impact the Pacific, full stop. We are the first people to actually lose land. I know people who come from Kiribati they've lost islands. It's real. It's happening. So I think the way that I'm also approaching this is to really tread softly on the earth and try not to leave much trace, try and spend as much money I can in Hawaiian with native Hawaiians, so that the sort of circulation of wealth is not going out to big global conglomerates that are, adding plastic, that are adding to the great issues of our day, which is the pollution and the plasticization of our water. So I'm really trying to create a work that isn't adding to more rubbish, so to speak, and to really try and acknowledge actually how we can make these points of celebration rather than kind of desperation.
No, that's completely what what you just described. I feel like that's part of my life every day as an artist and as a Tlingit person and as a mixed person and as an Alaskan. I can't ignore any of those things. Being other, I feel like the word minority, I don't always like that word, but being other, deviant from the mainstream, there's been so many policies to eliminate the other. A major function of art is to expose those, but also to live well, overcome a lot of that policy making that is bad for the other. So my art is natural fibers, it's plant fibers and animal fibers, and if that is threatened, that means our food sources are threatened, our air, our water. If the mountain goats are going away and cedar is endangered, I won't have a career as a weaver, and I won't get to practice these sacred ancient techniques.
So this brings me to my absolute favorite question that I get to ask guests on this podcast, which gets at the heart of the Imagine Otherwise theme and addresses a lot of what you all are exploring in Aikai. So this question has to do with that version of a better world that you're working towards when you create your art, when you teach a workshop, when you do the kind of work that you do in your communities. And so I'll ask you what might be a big question, perhaps a scary question, but I think it's a question that we don't get to ask each other enough, and we don't get enough opportunities to answer. So here's your chance, or one of them at least. What kind of world are you working towards? What kind of world do you want?
I can think of a lot of things, but the two words that really stick out to me are histories and relationships. I think it would be fabulous to live in a world where you can enter a place where we already have more of an authentic perception of people's histories, because there's so much misinformation about marginalized people, and that's used to further marginalize people. And if we could enter relationships with each other with a really holistic sense of history, I think that would reduce trauma or help us address a lot of generational trauma.
$1 million question, isn't it? What sort of world do I want? One that is kind and full of grace, even in the face of adversity. One that acknowledges difference and is able to acknowledge that there's some tough times coming up, but to also not get bogged down in it, really. I think that's enough, really. just quietly try and tap away at it in my own little way.
How about you, Léuli? What kind of world do you want?
I really believe in an earth-centered epistemology, so I think we need to, as humans, need to go back to who we have always been before the last 500 years of colonization and capitalism, and that is like having really reciprocal and strong relationships with all living creatures around us and the planet. I feel like all of the work of Indigenous people, particularly, but all people that care, is about getting back to who we are and remembering who we are as like we are part of the earth and the earth is part of us. And I think that kind of goes against Enlightenment ideals, but I think that's where we've lost ourselves. So caring world, a world that isn't overrun by crazy media and political oligarchy. I've been learning a lot in this. I'm in the sacred mountains of the Bow Valley at the moment, and we've been spending a lot of time talking and deep listening and kind of exploring lots of different Indigenous art histories and politics and philosophies and practices. I think something that's really inspiring me right now is to think about love. Where's the love gone? And how do we make work from a place of love rather than like, oh, I got to call this person out, I got to shut them down, or like I got to like fight against this thing, which is, yeah, it's true, but like sometimes that is like totally the situation that you're in, but does it really, if you're putting out that energy, does it actually impact in the way that you want it to? So I mean, it's really rich to say, so I'm going to keep working on it, but I want the spaces that I create in this project and my practice in general to be coming from a place of love and compassion and care, so that I can connect and I can be open to connecting with other people and other living beings that aren't humans. I think we need more love in the world. Sounds super hippie, but it's true.
Well, thank you three for being here and chatting with me about your vision of Aikai and what participants can expect to see come July.
Thank you so much. Mahalo nui loa.
I can hardly wait. It's going to be great. I am so excited.
Thanks for listening to this special episode of the Imagine Otherwise podcast. Be sure to check out the upcoming Aikai Culture Lab, July 7th through 9th in Honolulu, Hawaii. Aikai is organized by the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center, a migratory museum that brings Asian Pacific American history, art, and culture to you through innovative museum experiences online and throughout the United States. To find out more about AICAI and read about the amazing artists and scholars whose work AICAI features, go to smithsonianapa.org/AEKAI. The Imagine Otherwise podcast is produced by Ideas on Fire, an academic editing and consulting agency that works with progressive interdisciplinary academics. You can view the show notes for this episode, created by Priyanka Kara, on the Ideas on Fire website at ideasonfire.net, as well as find links to the people, projects, and resources discussed.